And away we go. Let's see what is wrapping about in the newscape this evening. It's only the beginning, or what could be the end. Greta Thunberg arrested at a protest supporting Palestine Action hunger strikers. On December 22nd, Swedish activist Greta Thunberg was arrested after joining a demonstration supporting Palestine Action hunger strikers outside Aspen Insurance at Plantation Place, London. Organisers said the action aimed to show solidarity with prisoners for Palestine hunger strikers and unprescribed Palestine Action, targeting Aspen Insurance for its services to Elbit Systems. The video shows Thunberg holding a placard reading "I support Palestine Action, prisoners," while two activists sprayed red paint, used hammers, and locked on before specialist officers intervened. City of London police said the 22-year-old was arrested under Section 13 of the Terrorism Act 2000 for displaying a placard supporting a proscribed organisation, while a man and a woman were arrested on suspicion of criminal damage. Since November 2nd, several prisoners for Palestine hunger strikers have required hospital treatment, including Amu Gib, 30, Cameron Ahmed, 28, who had gone 53 and 45 days without food respectively. Wow. I hope they're alright, even when a handful of people are fully despising their execution on advocating for lives in Palestine. If they're committed, fair enough. I'll give them some credit for that. No, actually, I'll give them a decent amount of credit for their commitment. Like, they're pushing their physical limits, so although it is concerning, and I hope they're alright, but that just comes to show how far they will go for Palestine and the Palestinians that live in the Gaza. In regards to Greta Thunberg, I can't I can't press on her too much. She is doing what she can, and she's doing what she believes is for the greater good. However, how often do you hear other individualistic names of protesters besides Greta Thunberg? I'm aware that there are protests going on around the world, yet no one gets as much individual limelight attention for anything protest or activism related than Greta Thunberg. I wonder if there are other individuals who are known for their activism and protesting that get as much attention as Greta Thunberg. If there aren't any people that get that as much PR as Greta Thunberg, why? Why don't those people get as much attention as Greta Thunberg? I'm not saying Greta Thunberg isn't going above and beyond. Yeah, I do hear about her every now and then. In fact, I hear about her in the realm of protesting, at least in terms of individual attention, than anyone else combined. Out of other individual well-known protesters, the only other protesters with any individual attention for their activism is if they get involved with Palestine Padilla and are going to the Gaza Strip to support the Palestinians, only to be stopped by the IDF, and then most of them get sent back to the countries of their origin. Other than that, when is the last time I heard of these people? Again, I'm not digging at them. I'm just curious. Where are they now? And are they doing any contributions to raise awareness for conflicts, events, or cries for support for people groups around the world? Give Greta some rest. Time for someone else to take the limelight and raise awareness for what is believed to be the right thing. Until then, let's just I'm not sure if I'm gonna hear the story again. Because from the summary, it's just I know the story's about an insurance company, And I know Palestine Action is mentioned in there, roughly. And yes, of course, the hunger strike. Can't forget about the hunger strike. Like, they're going days without food to raise awareness. Not just for supporting Palestine Action, but the particular location that they're protesting is outside the Aspen Insurance Building in London. Then that raises another question. Now that raises... Yes, I know that Aspen Insurance has its services to Albert Systems. That I know for sure. But what's so significant about the Albert Systems that is drawing attention to Palestine Action and other protesters advocating support for Palestine? That is a very good question. Also, the Terrorism Act of 2000. I have my own concerns regarding the Terrorism Act. Now, of course, terrorism in general is not okay. I condemn it wholly. However, to label protests like this as terrorism, it's an insult to actual terrorism. That's just me. I'm all for raising awareness about social issues and, of course, preventing acts of terrorism from being a threat to people's lives. But labeling this protest regarding Palestine Action as terrorism, in my opinion, is just stupid. Because how are you going to compare a large-scale coordinated attack on everyday people with alleged types of explosives, wherever that might be located in any given city, to a protest that's showing support for Palestinians or advocating for support for people groups somewhere in the world where they're not getting enough, they're not receiving enough food, medical attention, water, or not just or just limited necessities that's needed for survival, or just getting food day to day. And whilst I'm aware there will be people that are going to have their arguments about that, no, I'm not sure if it should going down that rabbit hole. I was going to mention that whilst there are TikTok videos, if there are any, of Palestinians asking for donations just so they have enough money to get by, there are people that are arguing that what's going on in Palestine, I'm not saying it's true, but that's what I'm hearing. There's a group of people saying that what's going on in Palestine is for show. The blood. Now, any pictures of amputee children, I will say that is for real. There is no way that you can't. There's no way people can fake being an amputee. But I have heard people, from what I've heard online, that what's going on in Palestine, not all of the time, but mostly, that whatever media coverage is all for show, and the scale that whoever's responsible for broadcasting such situations in Palestine is all in detail to make people sympathetic for Palestinians. That's as far as I can go. That's all I've heard, and as far as I can go. Either way, what's going on in Gaza, it has to stop. Whether it's real, fake, and whichever side people are on, just stop. And if this was happening where I am, I'd say the same thing. I want the violence to stop. It's not guaranteed. Not everyone's going to be on board with it. But one can hope that someday, despite our differences, we can live life in peace and harmony. Labour U-turns on farmer inheritance tax after tractor protests. The government will raise the inheritance tax relief threshold for farmers from £1 million to £2.5 million in a climb down following months of protest. The change to the reforms initially unveiled at Labour's first budget last year comes after ministers listened to concerns of the farming community and businesses. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, said on Tuesday. The original Treasury plans to raise money as farmers pass their business from generation to generation triggered protests with tractors outside Parliament and criticism from some Labour MPs in rural seats. And Baroness Minette Batters, the former head of the National Farmers Union, who led an independent review for the government, warned that the proposals had led farmers contemplating suicide to avoid the tax changes. The farmer whose father killed himself the day before last October's budget amid worries over the inheritance tax changes said the government's climb down is the best Christmas present for a lot of farmers. But he accused ministers of a complete lack of understanding and compassion towards rural communities. Jonathan Charlesworth, who founded his father, John Philip Charlesworth, dead in a barn on their farm in Silkstone, Barnsley, told the Press Association, "It's a welcome U-turn that won't bring back the lives lost over the last year or so due to the anxiety caused, but will hopefully prevent a flood of suicides running up to the commencement in April." He also said the flip side is, it should have been researched and put out to review before any announcement was made. The higher threshold, which will take effect in April, will allow spouses or civil partners to pass on up to £5 million in qualifying agricultural or business assets between them before paying inheritance tax, on top of existing allowances, DEFRA said. So firstly, someone lost their life because of the anxiety and the alleged potential impact that the original proposal for the inheritance tax would have on farmers. Of course, I will have to say, no, not have to, I want to say this. Rest in peace, John Philip Charlesworth. I send my condolences to the friends and family of John Philip Charlesworth. For someone to lose their life because of the potential impact of the inheritance tax, if that doesn't tell you anything, I don't know what will. And secondly, yeah, whoever said that this should have been researched more, they're right. This should have been looked up on more, because not just the fact that farmers are important to contributing to the country's infrastructure, not all of the infrastructure, but at least the existence of farmers' contributions with crops and produce to then give to markets for customers to buy such produce to continue with our lives, also as well as how much the assets of the land for the farm means so much to the people that run these farms. Because whatever amount of money farmers would have to pay for the land which they possess and the tax of inheritance that they would have to pay, having the farm being passed down from their parents or grandparents, it's got to be a lot of money. Whilst not many people pay attention to farmers, the land which the farms sit on are just as valuable as any land in any suburb or even any urban area. Or at least the land value is more for farmland than certainly mid-urban suburban areas. It's not much, but it is something. It's certainly something. Hopefully, whoever's next in charge, this story will teach the next governments a very important and valuable lesson. Never mess with the farmers. Never screw the farmers over. And especially, don't make them pay any tax, or if any amount of tax of inheritance for the farmland which the farmers possess from their parents or grandparents. It just says it all. Justice Department releases card mentioning Trump purportedly sent from Epstein to Nassau. This past week, the U.S. Department of Justice released nearly 30,000 pages, including a purported letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Dr. Larry Nassar, a former Michigan State University doctor, referencing our president shares our love of young, nubile girls. I'm not liking this already. Following bipartisan legislation by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, the U.S. Department of Justice was ordered to release Epstein Files, but missed the Friday, December 19th deadline. FBI and DOJ records show the letter was postmarked August 13, 2019, 3 days after Jeffrey Epstein was found dead on August 10th, 2019. And a chain of custody log shows discovery on September 25th, 2019, with a handwriting analysis submitted in mid-2020. The Department of Justice briefly removed, then re-uploaded files calling some claims about President Donald Trump untrue and sensationalist, and labeling the allegations unfounded and false. The White House referred comments to the DOJ. Heavy redactions and missing files have fueled outrage and scrutiny of the Department of Justice's handling, while Member of Congress threatened contempt for Attorney General Pam Bondi, and more files are expected in the coming weeks. Yep, it's already getting spicy. It's a lot of juice in this story. There's so much, whatever goes on. And also, something I just noticed. Not to say it's true. However, if it is true, then that's just blowing my mind. August 15th and December 25th of 2019, respectively. It's not too close, but it is, however, at least less than a year before the global-wide coronavirus lockdowns. Make of that information as you will. I'm just finding this out now that the day that Jeffrey Epstein is allegedly no longer with us, and when the first coronavirus case was made public, and up until the lockdowns happened across the globe, that seems like rather convenient timing for whoever's responsible to ensure that people don't find out about the Epstein Files too soon. And I say too soon because even though there isn't much talk at the time about the Epstein Files, even at that point, especially right now, people are gonna know about what happened on the island that Epstein supposedly hosted parties with young individuals. So yeah, I just found that as a very convenient coincidence that the moment that Jeffrey Epstein passed away and the whole debacle about coronavirus started gaining traction, and then we were all had to stay in our homes for 2 years at least. That is convenient. Very, very convenient. Doesn't get more convenient than that. I'll say it like that. Even no, I don't think this is all laid out like that. Even if it was, that's something. I'll give them. I'll say it like that. That is something to have moments like that to be conveniently right on cue. And then the rest was history. But of course, that one last one. It did not last long. Pentagon to deploy XAI's Grok to 3M personnel. The Pentagon announced adding XAI's Grok to GenAI.mil, the Department of Defense's bespoke AI platform, expanding its generative AI capabilities. Ordering Grok onto the GSA's approval AI vendor list gave federal workers access since the White House ordered it in August. Launched early this month, GenAI.mil joins Google's Gemini on the platform, which the Pentagon says will usher in an AI-driven culture change at the agency. Several examples emerged this summer of Grok responding with anti-Semitic tropes and praising Hitler, documented by users and critics who observed problematic outputs. After spending billions on Colossus data centers, XAI is pushing to commercialize Grok despite embarrassing episodes during monetization efforts. I don't have much to say on this. And even if I do, I'd most likely be on the fence with this. Not to say that there is a lot of bad that will come from this, yet there will be a lot more dialogue and conversations regarding just AI in general and chatbots, getting involved in federal level task force and work, showing that regardless of what people believe and think of AI as somewhat lazy and sloppy in its efforts and just doesn't look so polished, and they're right on that. Unfortunately, this will be the way forward in the next few years. AI is going to be implemented in some way. However, as of this moment, what we can do is limit how often and how frequently people use artificial intelligence, and especially passing legislation, preventing companies, businesses, and other organizations how often AI in general or other automated entities are to complete daily and weekly tasks within the business, company, or organization. That's at least something I would do. I would propose that businesses and organizations limit how often and how frequently AI is used in their business. Whilst there are impressive capabilities just with AI as a general purpose of, or to be specialized in a particular aspect of work or expertise, the reliance of said AI can be concerning over time. And if said AI is to not work as it should, or it just shuts down completely because there isn't enough electricity, especially since the AI data centers are sucking up all the electricity that's from whatever electricity being produced, what is anyone going to do? Are we going back to manual labor? Are we going to get humans to do the work that AI is supposed to be doing? It shouldn't have come down to this to begin with. Yet here we are. And whilst there will certainly, and there are, a handful of people saying that we shouldn't use AI, we can't allow AI to take over creative spaces. And actually, I agree with that. AI in creative spaces is just, at best, very lazy. No matter how hard we try to prevent people from using AI to its fullest extent, there will be people that will do that. And there's nothing else from that point anyone could do. Once you open Pandora's box, there's no way of closing it. End of. It is over. 1 or 2 more decades left of continuing with work, mostly AI-free. 1 or 2 more decades of the current employment landscape that we have now. Yeah, that's about it. Judge Boasberg orders return of Venezuelan deportees challenging Alien Enemies Act removal. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to return a group of Venezuelan men previously held at a notorious Salvadorian prison to the US, or give them a hearing to contest allegations of gang membership. The men were deported after Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act, declaring alleged Venezuelan gang members as enemies of the state who could be deported with little due process. A report by human rights groups determined that the treatment of Venezuelan deportees imprisoned at the Salvadorian prison amounted to arbitrary detention and enforced disappearance under international law. Honestly, I don't think there's much for me to argue with this. If there's anything for me to say, well, there hasn't been much said about what laws Venezuelan deportees have committed whilst they were in the US. Anyone that is from the country or completely foreign to said country, if you break a law of the sort, local, federal, maybe both, you are going to be arrested. You will likely have a trial to prove your innocence. And if the court finds you guilty of such laws that you have potentially or allegedly broken, you will be punished, either with community service, prison, time in prison, or mainly, or most, or possibly, just mainly applying to foreigners, most likely be sent back to the country which said foreigner had came to the country which they have committed the crime where they're from. Not to say that these foreigners were actually from the country which they have came out of to come into the country which they tried to settle in and have allegedly committed said crime in. If people find out, or whichever authorities are responsible find out which country said foreigner who's committed the crime has originally left out, exited from, to come to the country which said foreigner wants to immigrate to, it is likely that said foreigner will be sent back to said country which they have originally came out of to get into the country where they had this trial and been arrested for the crimes which they have potentially allegedly committed. That's how I believe it should go. And I have no problem with foreigners coming into another country, trying to find a job, and maybe bring their family to start a new life in said country which they want to immigrate to. I'm alright with that. If you are going to immigrate to another country, at least understand the customs, the culture, and what goes on in the country which you are immigrating to. Not so that it gets rid of your original culture which you were raised from, or the culture of your ancestors. It is mainly for the safety of the said foreigners. So if they do something which seems okay to them but is somehow offensive to the people living in the country which they immigrated to, that will cause some problems. And this could go for any country. Whatever gestures or saying you believe is okay to you or your family could potentially be offensive to people from another country. There are many cultural differences where there is room for interpretation, and especially likely to have some kind of misunderstanding. But at least one of the reasons. Another thing I would say, if you are going to immigrate to another country, which is outside the country which you were born in, or have raised most of your life in, if there's any documentation that is required for you to have, be verified, or to complete, in order for you to immigrate to said country which you want to spend the rest of your life in, make sure you understand what those requirements are and eligibility and what eligibility you need to meet to ensure you can immigrate to said country. Not to say it's to get rid of the culture of the ancestors. It is mainly to see how well you can adjust to a new environment that isn't your own, as well as to see how much you understand the culture of the country which you're immigrating to, and the customs, as well as understanding if there are things that may seem offensive to others that you won't think is offensive to you. Don't think immigration officers would ask you the latter, but it is still important nonetheless. That's all. I think that's all that's to be said. Otherwise, back to the story about Venezuelan deportees. Again, I don't know what laws they have broken whilst they're in the US, or whatever laws they have broken that even sent them to an El Salvadorian prison. Nonetheless, whatever it was, it seems serious. You can't just be sent to a prison for no reason whatsoever. There has to be something that someone is allegedly guilty of for such people to be sent to where they have been sent to. Again, you can't just be sent to prison for whatever reason. There has to be some kind of law that these people have broken, which is of high urgency and importance and high seriousness, that has led such people to be sent to such prisons which they are spending their sentence in. Canadian economy shrank by 0.3% in October, biggest drop in almost 3 years. On Tuesday, Statistics Canada reported real GDP contracted 0.3% in October, more than wiping out September's 0.2% expansion. Manufacturing weakness and strikes punished output down as the Canadian Union of Postal Workers strike cut postal services by 32.1%, and an Alberta teacher strike reduced education output by 1.8%. Wood products manufacturing plunged 7.3%, its steepest drop since 2020. Machinery manufacturing slid 6.9%, and finance and insurance rose 0.4% to a record high, while 11 of 20 industrial sectors contracted. Earlier this month, the Bank of England held its policy rate at 2.25%, but the October contraction complicates its narrative as Statistics Canada November advanced estimate points to a 0.1% rebound, with official figures due January 30th, 2026. Amid US trade hurdles and strikes, a 0.30% October contraction matched the steepest monthly decline of the year, echoing a similar August slump. So it seems like to me that some sectors in Canada have gone up a bit, other sectors in Canada have gone down a bit. Yet, to say this has been a record drop in years, that just, to me, that sounds like the rate in which sectors in Canada rises and drops seems rather moderate. Nothing too drastic or extreme about how much it rose or fallen in each sector in Canada's economy. It's very moderate. Not too much. A little bit, not too much. So long as the Canadian economy is looking stable, then there isn't much else to say. Although I'd like to see Canada's economy doing other rises in many sectors in the future. However, it is better to have something stable than to see sectors making a decline drastically. That would be a disaster. That would be awful. I would say the same thing for the UK. I would rather see steady rises rather than steady drops. Or at least I would rather see moderate rates going up and down, less than 1% rise and fall, rather than to see 1+% decline in any and every sector. Warriors pull away from Orlando Magic after Draymond Green leaves game. On Monday in San Francisco, Stephen Curry, two-time MVP, scored 18 of his 26 points in the second half as the Golden State Warriors beat the Orlando Magic 120-97. Following halftime adjustments, Curry missed all 6 of his first threes, was 3 for 13 at halftime, and then helped spark the Warriors' comeback after Green exited. Bench production fueled the run as Moses Moody scored 20 and Brandon Podziemski added 16 with 5 assists and 4 rebounds, while Golden State forced 18 Orlando turnovers. The Warriors will host Dallas on December 25th in a Christmas afternoon game, and then won't return to Chase Center until 2026. Earlier this month, Golden State Warriors won back-to-back games at Chicago and Cleveland, but had no strong wins since November 16 to 19. Buddy Hield returned with a late 3, while Jonathan Kuminga remained out due to illness. Okay, Golden State Warriors are doing pretty well. But this is the NBA. Even though one team is doing very well and could win the championship or the conference title, doesn't mean it's likely for them to win said conference title or to win any title of any kind. You never know what's going to happen in any US sports league, given how balanced the valuations between teams are. And there are very strict drafts and transfer limits on how much players of a sports team in any US sports league is to be paid each year. And if the overall payroll for an entire US sports team goes over a certain limit that's put in place by the league organizers, then there will be penalties and fines, or even limitations on how much business said sports team in the United States can do in terms of getting new players or the amount of draft picks that those teams are allowed to choose. So that's why I say that whilst this is looking good for Golden State Warriors to win back-to-back games, you never know if the next few games could be draws, if that's even possible in basketball, or even they could lose by quite a few margins. Actually, what would happen if a game in basketball, American football, or even rugby were to draw? Do they split the points they have? Do they not get any points at all? Or do they both get the amount of points they would usually get if they were to win that game? No, that's just me with limited knowledge on other sports besides soccer and football, yeah. A young man's journey from Chinese orphanage to high school track star. The Alabama governor honored Chase Lovell, teen adopted from China, for thriving academically and on the Oakmont High School track, earning the Chase Lovell Award. Approved in late 2019, Miranda and Adam Lovell pushed to adopt Chase, who arrived in January 2020 at age 11 with his Chinese name, Tao Tao, kept as his middle name, a worn leather bracelet with a single thread given by the man who first taught Chase to walk, stayed with him as a keepsake, while a teacher who met Chase years ago recalled his early academic questions. At track meets, teammates and spectators now recognize him, and he waves to the Lovell family in the bleachers, showing strong community support. Miranda Lovell says she wrote repeatedly to the Chinese orphanage, offering speech pathology support, highlighting societal attitudes towards disability while his life remains still chasing. That's a nice story. Certainly a break from the horrible stuff that's going on in the world. And also January 2020 too. That's again, I don't want to bring up COVID again. However, how convenient timing that is. I think anything's convenient timing before COVID lockdowns happened. However, back to the story about a young man from the Chinese old village. That's quite the journey. That's a great story. Maybe this could inspire more to do the same. But of course, it's not just enough to have passion and commitment. You also got to have discipline and consistency in order to achieve the goals you want to achieve. And this goes for anything. Where you want to be in the cheerleading team, play soccer, football, be in the track team, become CEO of a company, start your own business. Discipline and consistency is very important, as well as having motivation, commitment, and determination to achieve what you want to achieve. I'm not sure if I'm going to hear of Chase Lavelle again, but I hope I do. Especially in the lead up to the next Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles. I wonder what's going to be done in LA before then. Yeah. I've said it a while ago, so I can't remember exactly, but I know California is constructing high-speed rail, not just in preparation for the Olympics, but this has been going on for quite a while. People in California are still wondering, is this ever going to be done? Probably not, especially not in the next year or two, but it will be done, so long as there's further commitments to get that project done. But of course, until the next Olympic Games in Los Angeles, hopefully we can see Chase Lavelle compete for the United States or China. But it's most likely he'll represent the United States. But he has to join an NBA team. Oh no, sorry, yeah. My bad, that's a different sport. Why am I thinking of the NBA? But yeah, who knows? Who knows what lies ahead for athletes in any sport? Stories like this may seem great, but it takes a lot of legwork to get to where they want to be. And that is it for the episode.